Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Season 16 premiere of The Toss-Up. I'm Riley Woodall, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about. Students are back on campus. The dog days of August are behind us, unless, of course, you live in Indiana. And tailgating season is upon us, which means college football is back. But it's a new era in the sport. We'll break down the expanded Big Ten Conference and the implications of the new 12-team playoff. Stick around, because it's all next on The Toss-Up. Love it or hate it, we are living in the college football renaissance. Parity in the sport is at an all-time high. New teams in new conferences and new faces in new organizations. Big games every single week. And of course, Nick Saban retiring from the sport is arguably the greatest college football coach of all time. And there are no longer 4 teams that will have a shot at immortality, but 12 teams. This is the beginning of an era unlike any we have seen in college football, and the fun is only just getting started. We're here to break that all down for you, and I'm joined by an incredibly talented panel of IU sports media goats, Ava Wegenke, Ben Haller, and of course, Daniel Flick. Guys, college football, as I mentioned in the intro, it's back.
It's definitely back, and I'm super excited for this new 18-team conference the Big Ten is going into. You've got the new 4 teams coming in from the West. They're going to bring a competitive edge and I think mix some things up with the original Big Ten opponents. You've also got the new fan base coming in as well, and I think it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it. We're going to jump straight into it, the 18-team Big Ten Conference. What are you guys most excited for with this expanded conference?
I mean, just like I said, you know, the fans and the competitiveness, I think that these new teams from the West bringing in have.
I think if I had to look at one thing, I think I am stoked that there are no longer divisions in the Big Ten. I think a couple things you look at. Last time, Big Ten West team was within 1 score of an East team in the Big Ten championship. It was Wisconsin in 2017. A Big Ten West team hadn't won the Big Ten championship since 2012. And a couple teams in particular in the East. You look at Indiana and Rutgers just for as examples. Their schedules actually get easier from this year with 4 new teams coming in, 4 good teams coming in, but it's because they're not just playing East teams anymore.
Yeah, you know, it's fun. It's new, right? I feel like there's only so many matchups you can have, you know, when it's at 12 teams or, you know, however many it's been in years past. But it's like it's fun. There's a level of unknown, I feel like, that makes everything so much fun. And it's early in the year, you know, every team pretty much out there is very optimistic right now. And there's a level out there of like, we think we can be this good, but we don't really know, right? And I think when you add in however many new teams, and it's like IU has like a probably 5-hour flight, you know, out west here pretty soon. And it's like it's new, right? And just that level of being able to live in a new reality, fresh, being the very first ones to actually experience that's pretty fun.
Well, you mentioned being fresh. Oregon is very, very fresh with all the uniforms that they come out with every single year. And they're the team that I think a lot of people have, at least in the preseason, that's coming in from the West Coast as a team that has the best shot to win the Big Ten and even win the national championship. So, Ava, what would it mean for the Ducks in their first season in the Big Ten Conference? What would it mean for them and the Big Ten as a whole if the Ducks won the conference this year?
I think it would be huge, not only for the Big Ten, but the Ducks program as well. I mean, they, on paper, are a very competitive team. They definitely have the potential to go far and be up there. I'm excited to see how Dylan Gabriel kind of fires and develops in a Will Stein offense. I think that's going to be really huge. And they're at a huge advantage with a lot of their roster returning and coaches returning as well. And their head coach, I mean, he's just such a fiery, ruthless guy. And I feel like if that aura pours into his team, they've got that shot.
Well, it's a new quarterback, as you mentioned. Dylan Gabriel, I would kind of describe as a Bo Nix 2.0. He really is a point guard at that quarterback position. He distributes the ball very well. They've got a lot of weapons on the outside, too. Another new quarterback in a new position, Ben, Ohio State and Will Howard. This is a team that has a mountain full of expectations in Columbus this season. So I got to ask you, what is your definition of success for the Buckeyes this year? Is it natty or bust? Is it as simple as that, or is it just please, for the love of God, beat Michigan?
Well, I think it's interesting, right? And I think there's levels to it with Ohio State this year. I'll start by saying I think success for them is making the college football championship, being in that final two, just with how good Georgia is. Now, I'll start by saying it is an utter failure if they cannot beat Michigan this year, especially with how Michigan looked week one. I think that's job number one. They play them in Columbus. So unless they win the championship, if they lose to Oregon or if they lose to Michigan at home, I think that's it for Ryan Day. Now, the reason I say that I don't know if it's realistic that they can win the championship. It's definitely realistic if they can, but if they call it a failure if they don't, it's just because I'm still skeptical of Will Howard in the quarterback play, and Georgia is once again a very, very good team. The other interesting part about this is even if it's not, I think it's a success if they lose in the championship, it still might be the end for Ryan Day because I think you get a sense of complacency. That's what we've seen the last 4 years with losing to Michigan, with losing in the semifinal or in the championship. So I think it can still be a success if they make the championship and lose, but I think it could be it for Ryan Day.
Yeah, and you mentioned the expectations, obviously, right? I think in terms of the transfers that they picked up, the offense is going to take some time to develop, but defensively, they're shaping up, at least talent-wise on paper, to have the best defense in college football. So I think that will help the offense transition along as they get into the rest of the season. Another team in the Big Ten Conference that's got a very, very talented defense is Michigan. D-Flick, the hated rivals of Ohio State. They still believe they're the team to beat. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh gone, J.J. McCarthy gone, Blake Corum gone. Sharon Moore gets promoted, but it's still the same culture, same team, same system, same program. So I'd ask, how do you see Michigan performing this year as a whole, and what would it take for them to pull off the miracle, some might say, and go back-to-back as national champions?
Yeah, for as much as Ryan Day's seat is warm, I think Sharon Moore is in a really cool spot, right? Because he inherits a team with so much talent to it, but he can really kind of control his own narrative. They lost 13 players, right? They had more players drafted than anybody else in the entire sport. It's an entirely new slate. I think a lot of people thought Alex Orji would kind of really replace McCarthy. And week one, they came out and he threw about 3 passes, right? Ran it 5 times, had about 31 total yards of offense. And I think Michigan as a whole passed about 121 yards, right? So last year they were so good running the football. That's, you mentioned Corum, great football player off to LA. They have, the same pieces to where the identity they had last year is still in place. It's going to, in my personal opinion, I thought McCarthy last year, for as much of a controversial figure as he was in the sport, it was either you love him, you hate him, right?
Yeah.
Their passing game isn't why they won a natty last year, right? That is not why. But he still made enough throws when he needed to.
Yep.
So whether it's
Clutch
Alex
moments in particular.
Yeah, exactly. And I still think Alex Orji is probably the most talented QB on that roster, has a level of excitement, a level of playmaking, I think, that makes him a very unique player. So if they can figure out that QB spot to where they have, a real playmaker there, I think it elevates the whole, floor of that team. I think it's going to be interesting to watch because, again, they were a little bit rough early on week one and ended up winning by about 20 points, I want to say. We'll see. There's so much new there. It's a really interesting team because, again, there's a lot of continuity but a lot of fresh faces too. So it's hard to restock, right? It's really hard, and you lose as much talent as Michigan lost from last year. It's tough.
Yeah, so we mentioned the big 3. I kind of want to zoom out to the rest of the conference as a whole. And this new 12-team playoff format, I think, benefits a lot of the other, lower tier teams in the Big Ten. I say lower tier, but you've got the elite ones, obviously Oregon, Ohio State. Those are the 2 that people have talked about in the preseason. But you get down there like a Nebraska, right? That's a team with Dylan Raiola now that really kind of has a shot that they believe to make the college football playoff this year. So the new 12-team format, how does that affect the Big Ten Conference and all the teams that are in it heading into this year?
I think it feels like so many years it's whoever loses, Ohio State and Michigan is just out of it. I feel like if this is a year where they're 11-0 heading into it, if you lose, you're probably still in, right? And now if that's how it plays out, I guess we'll have to see. But it's the type of deal where it feels like in years past the conference has lost out on a real chance to have a true representative challenger because they went 11-1 and because of the whole conference format, as we mentioned earlier. So I think it helps in the sense that you can now get 2, if not 3 quality teams in there, right? To where in years past, if you go 11-0 and lose a heartbreaker in overtime to your rival, you're just kind of out of luck.
I think the big game, will always have its importance in terms of what kind of rivalry it is, obviously. But I think you've seen the last few years, there have been multiple occurrences where those two teams might have been the best two teams in the country,
right.
Ohio State and Michigan. And that game in particular determined who was going to the Big Ten championship and who was going to be in the college football playoff out of the Big Ten. I'm interested to see now, not just this year because I don't trust Michigan, but heading into the future with Ohio State and Michigan, if a team can lose the game and still come back and make or win a national championship.
Ava?
I've got to go kind of what with Flick said. I'm really excited, and I think it's huge that now a couple teams who had maybe just missed that mark because they had one loss, even though they've been this power-dominating team in the conference all season. I'm really excited to see now that they get that opportunity and that they can potentially go and have a run and do big things in the 12-team or in the extended playoff.
Yeah, and again, in the 14 playoff, you lose 1 or 2 games and the season's over. Right now, teams that have 2 losses or maybe even 3 losses, depending on how the rest of the country shakes out, still has a shot to be in the new 12-team playoff. Going to be really exciting to watch this year. Stick around because when we come back, we'll break down some of the biggest Big Ten matchups of the season. Don't go anywhere.
The Toss-Up, Fridays on IUSTV.
Time now for Precarious Predictions. We will be predicting the biggest Big Ten games of the season, the conference champ, and which teams from the conference will make the playoff and how far they will go. Ava is up first. You've got Week 9, Nebraska at Ohio State.
Riley, I'm taking Ohio State on this one. You're in Columbus. Ryan Day's got nothing to lose. Nebraska, I mean, they could pull off the upset, but they're still got stuff to figure out before Week 9.
Ben, Week 10, offense versus defense, Oregon versus Michigan.
I think this might spoil a little bit on a future pick, but I think Oregon's going to be undefeated going into that game.
Whoa.
I think it's somewhat of a trap game, and I think Michigan's a team that gets better as the season goes on. In Ann Arbor, I got Michigan.
D-Flick, you got one of the best rivalries in college football also in Week 10. Ohio State goes to Happy Valley to take on the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, really, a rivalry that Penn State hasn't won since, I want to say, 2016, 2017, right? It'll probably be a whiteout. It'll be loud. I need to see more from Drew Aller before I pick against Ohio State in this setting.
I'm going right back to you. You've got one of the biggest games in college football this season. Ohio State in Week 7 goes to Eugene to take on the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, I think Autzen, Oregon, very underrated college town. That'll be another loud environment. That's one where I'm going to lean with an experienced quarterback in Oregon. I think Oregon ends up pulling that one.
Ben, Ava?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. The quarterback play is very important in that game. I think those are 2 of the most talented rosters in the country. I think Gabriel proves himself. I think Will Howard gets beat in that game.
I go with Oregon as well. I mean, you've got that strong Oregon offense, and Ohio State's got that strong defense, but if Oregon can just snap it right up, it's Oregon.
Well, it's a 4-person Oregon panel because I've also got the Ducks in that game as well. But stay tuned on the Big Ten Championship. We'll get there in a second. Ava, I'm going right back to you with our last head-to-head in particular, at least in the regular season. Rivalry week, the game. Michigan goes to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes.
I got the Buckeyes. The Buckeyes all the way. I don't know. I need to see more from Michigan, and I just think Ohio State's got this one. I do.
Ben?
I can't imagine any scenario where Michigan wins that game.
I think Ohio State is just a more safe pick at this stage. It's just there's too many question marks. That I kind of mentioned earlier. There's way too many questions around Michigan.
Yeah, I'm also going Ohio State too. I think they win by 10 at the lowest possible, at the minimum. Ohio State's just way too talented this year for Michigan. So we've reached the Big Ten Championship game. So you guys are going to pick who's going to be in your Big Ten Championship game and then who wins it. D-Flick, you're up first.
I was really hoping I wouldn't be up first here. I think I'm going to go with Ohio State will be in the game. I tend to think it's going to be one of the West Coast teams as well. I think there's a real chance we get Ohio State-Oregon in a rematch.
And who wins it?
In a neutral site setting, I think I would tend to lean Ohio State comes back and takes it.
I'm going to agree with the Ohio State-Oregon pick. I think that'll be the championship. Both of those teams will have one loss. I think Oregon beats them twice.
Oregon beats them twice. All right, so we got Ohio State winning, Oregon winning. Ava?
I'm saying Ohio State-Oregon rematch, and I think Ohio State takes this one. I don't think Ryan Day is going to let another loss to the Ducks happen again.
Okay, for the sake of being different, I'm going to say Penn State makes the Big Ten Championship game against Ohio State, but the Buckeyes get it done, and they are Big Ten champions. So, of the Big Ten teams, who makes the playoff and how far will they go? Ava, you're up.
I think that we got Ohio State and Oregon definitely up in that playoff, and I think they make the run. Ohio State possibly the biggest. I think don't rule out Penn State and Michigan. Keep an eye.
The ACC has not looked great. The Big 12, a lot of question marks. I think we're seeing 4 Big 10 teams. I think you're seeing Ohio State, you're seeing Oregon, you're seeing Penn State, and I think USC after that Week 1 showing is going to be in there. Ohio State loses in the national championship.
Miller Moss time.
Yeah,
I like
absolutely.
it.
I like the USC pick. I think Miller Moss is a real player. I can't pick USC though. In that same tier, I'm going to go Ohio State, and I think you see, the positive effect of having 12 teams where Oregon can still, lose in Indy and still find a way in. So I'll go Ohio State, Oregon. I think the conference ends up sending 2.
I think Dylan Raiola is him. I think he's the chosen one in Lincoln this year. So I think Nebraska is going to make the playoff. Ohio State, Oregon, that's 3. And I agree with Ben. 4 teams are getting in. I think Penn State's going to go. Selfishly, I want to see a home playoff game in Happy Valley. That environment is going to be absolutely insane. So to the national championship, do any of those teams you mentioned make it to the national championship or win it?
I think Ohio State makes it. I don't think they win it.
I agree. I think it's Ohio State losing to Georgia.
I think if any of them make it, it'll be Ohio State, and I kind of agree as well. Probably not a title year in Columbus.
I've got Ohio State, Oregon rematching in the national championship, and the Buckeyes win it on a game-winning field goal. Redemption after that loss a couple years ago to Georgia in the semifinal. D. Flick, Ben, Ava, thank you guys so much for coming on. This was such a blast. We can't wait. I can't wait for the rest of the college football season to come along. That's going to do it for us this week. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Be sure to continue the discussion and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at IUSTV Sports, and give our Toss-Up socials a follow on those platforms as well. With that, there's one thing left to do, so toss it up, find out if we'll catch it, and we'll see you in the end zone. Have a great fall, everyone. God bless.